Welcome to a very special edition of Board Game Crusaders. Why so special? Because we're covering Rune Wars, of course. What's so special about Rune Wars? Well, Rune Wars happens to be my gateway game. Before Rune Wars, the most complicated thing I'd ever played was Risk. Don't get me wrong, I loved Risk and I played it religiously. Which is why, when I found myself in my local game store, trying to revitalize my interest in Magic the Gathering, because I hadn't played it in about 2 years. On my way out, I saw this monstrous box that looked to me like there was a Death Knight fighting some elves, with some undead stuff behind it. And I love zombies, and I love medieval fantasy. So I looked at the box, and I flipped it over, and on the back it looked like Risk, except there were dragons, and wizards, and knights, and elves, and all kinds of cool stuff. And I thought to myself, looks good. And I bought it. And this very eventful day sparked a beautiful thing inside of me. The beautiful addiction, hobby, right? We're calling it a hobby? The beautiful hobby that is board gaming. So without further ado, here is Rune Wars and the Banners of War expansion. At the beginning of the game, you're going to decide who's the first player. You're going to do that by looking at the back of these fate cards. And you get your fate card deck collected. Each player gets one fate card. In a 4-player game, you just deal 4 of those out, one to each player. Then you reveal the fate cards. The fate cards have a lot of information on them, so don't let that bog you down right now. All we're looking at is the number on the bottom in the little orb. You're going to look at that number and determine who goes first by who has the highest value. So, 15 is clearly higher than 7 and 6 and 1, so whoever got this card is the person that gets to be designated the first player. Then you shuffle these right back into the fate card deck and put it aside for now. Next, you're going to choose your faction. The factions come in 4 different flavors. We have the red Chaos people with that faction symbol. We have the green, which are the elves, which have that faction symbol. We have the blue, they're the humans with that faction symbol. And then we have the purple, which are the undead, and they have that faction symbol. So you're going to want to, after choosing your factions, however you want to do it, starting with the first player, or if you can all decide on who you want to be, just without fighting and drawing too much blood, then do it that way. But once you've got your characters determined, you're just going to gather together everything that matches the colors of your characters. So these are I guess we'll kind of go over this. This is the order cards. I'll go over these at the very, very end in great detail, because it's pretty much all you need to know to play the game. If you have the expansion, you have this, which gives you a new winning condition, which we'll cover later. And these, which are upgrades you can purchase, which we'll cover later, but I do want to cover how these work as far as reading the card. So in here you'll see the text of what the card does, and here we have the cost of how much resource you have to spend in order to get the upgrade. These are played next to you in a revealed manner. You can see what these are. They're not random by any means. When you want to purchase one of these and you've played the appropriate command card, you can choose any one of them freely, as long as you can pay the cost for them. And then they are intact and a part of your abilities from then out, as soon as you've purchased it. They're not one-time use, they don't go away. So I think that's all we'll hit on with that. You're also going to gather together, of course, all of your individual units and all of your tokens that match your colors. You're going to see some of these, which are outlined on page 33. I'm not really going to touch on what they do individually, but 33 in the instruction manual covers them very clearly. You'll gather together this if you have the expansion, this in the base game, this, and everything token-wise that matches your faction's colors, with one obvious exception. I would hope maybe 2 obvious exceptions. These are damage counters. You do not put them with your Chaos group. These are influence tokens. You do not put them with your human group. But aside from that, gather together everything that matches your faction color. you're also going to look for one of these resource and battle boards for your faction. If you're dealing with the expansion, you'll also have this to expand upon the battle board for fights and stuff. And you're going to want to set your resources all to the starting position. The starting position will vary with each faction. The starting position is the position that is indicated by the different color. As you can see, these are white, and that's kind of a brown or a reddish color. That's the starting position for that marker. And that's the starting position, that's the starting position. So you've got your resources in the starting positions. You're also going to make sure you give yourself that many tactics cards and that many influence resources, and draw one objective based on your faction. These are the objective decks, and as you can see, these guys would get to draw from this one. Good guys would draw from this one. At the beginning of the game, you give yourself one of these, and you try to achieve it on one of your turns. The turn that you achieve it, you give yourself a rune, and throw that to the discard and draw a replacement, which you then try to achieve for a rune. That's a primary source of gaining runes outside of conquering and questing with heroes. Next, we pull up the quest deck. This is a short and small quest deck because I have already taken out all of the quests that say set up quest. You're going to deal 2 of these out randomly to each player. So in a 4-player game, you can get 2, 4, 6, 8. Hey, look at that. I didn't plan that out ahead, did I? And then each player will look at what they've got. Doesn't matter if they're secret or not, you're just going to look for the tiles matching the number. So for instance, this says 3A. You will find tile 3A and you will grab it, and then you'll find 10A. And each player will find the tiles, the 2 tiles that coincide with their starting order cards that they have. Now, starting with that player that was first player and working to the left, each player will place 1 tile. Now this happens to have 1 tile in it, but this is also considered 1 tile. And I don't want you guys that have the 2nd edition to get too jealous, but I gotta say, 1st edition, way cooler, because check this out. We've got 3D landscape. Pretty cool, yeah? So, at any rate, when you're setting up the board, first player starts in the middle and places a tile. This is actually a fortunate one to have because it's kind of the odd man out. It's the only tile that's a single. And so normally, let's actually start with something else. Let's say they placed this in the middle. Normally the rule is you have to have 2 of these hexes touching 2 of those hexes. So this would be a legal position. This would be a legal position because those 2 are touching those 2. This would not be a legal position. Neither would this. So they have to have at least 2 touching 2. I'll fill the mountains in later. So first player placed this, second player placed that. Third player is going to come around and say, well, let's put this here. Fourth player is going to come around and put them here. And now, the rules when placing tiles, aside from 2 has to match against 2, is that blue can never back red. So this is not a legal position because the water tokens cannot share a border with the mountain tokens. However, mountains can share with mountains, just not there because that's not legal because that one is touching 2 and you need to have 2 touching 2. So let's say it's like that. Now this is another exception to the rule because as you can see, it doesn't have 2. So as long as it is touching 2 tiles, that's all that matters. Now in the course of the setup, you will find that it is perfectly legal to leave holes like that, as you can see, because it's still touching on 2. If there is ever a hole in the map, nothing can fly over it, nothing can go through it. That is completely impassable, even if people have flight. So bear that in mind as well. So the game setup continues just like that until your map is built. One more thing that would have made sense to cover when I was covering this bad boy, but the yellow border right here. The yellow border does not cause any movement hindering. However, the red border or the yellow border cannot be placed against a red border, and it cannot be placed against a blue border. So essentially, red, yellow, and blue cannot be touching any of the other colors. However, they can be touching each other when setting up the game. So let's kind of go over what we look at when we look at the tiles. Red indicates that it's a mountain range. It cannot be crossed through by anything except flying creatures. Sometimes you'll get tactical cards that allow you to pass through mountains as well, but otherwise they're impassable. Blue indicates water. Water is also impassable by everybody except flying creatures until winter. In winter, they're frozen over and you can cross them freely. Again, yellow has no movement restrictions, but they do have placement restrictions. Looking at the landscape, you see a bunch of pretty art. You also see the tile number, how much resource this tile generates. This one happens to be 2 food. Sometimes it's just a lumber, or sometimes it's a lumber and a food, or what have you. And this indicates any neutral units that will be placed. It has a symbol which coexists with the symbol on the neutral character cheat sheet right here. So you know that's a beastman, and you're going to put 2 beastmen on this tile at the beginning of the game. We also see city markers. If there's a city marker, then you're going to want to place one of the cities on it when we get to the city setup. Alright, so now that we have the map set up, the player who is player 1 takes one of these for each player and starts placing them around as the starting positions. A couple rules when placing these as starting positions. First rule is it has to have at least 3 tiles connecting that don't touch mountain or water. The expansion doesn't really clarify yellow, so take it for what it is. But for the mountain or the water, you have to have at least 3 of these edges. So this is not a good starting position because 2 of them touch mountains and only 1 is open. This, however, with 1, 2, 3, would be perfectly legal. If we move over here, that would also be perfectly legal because even though there's a mountain, there's 1, 2, 3 that are open. The other rule is they have to be 4 sections apart. So 1, 2, 3, 4. The next one can go right here. Now if we're playing with the yellow rule, we would have to rotate this a little bit to make that a doable position. And then 1, 2, 3, 4. Another one right here. And 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so that brings us all the way back to they're all separated 4 apart. So if 4 apart doesn't work for you, you can also do 3 apart. So let's just adjust this over, and let's just adjust this over, and that should leave it so 1, 2, 3. That can go there, rather there, and then it's still not far enough apart. So we would technically have to redefine this map and rebuild it. There we go. That's how it looks all said and done. Once all the starting positions are placed, then starting with the person immediately to the left of the first player gets to take their headquarters here. Now each player will have a tile that has their symbol, their faction symbol on it. They're going to be 3 hectagons large, and yours won't have a gaping hole there if you're working with 2nd edition. I have 1st edition, so I have mountains that I get to place in those spots. Oh, super awesome. Anyway, and then that player will choose one of these destinations they would like to have as their starting position. Now when starting with the starting position, you have to place it just like any other tile where 2 have to touch 2. And as long as, if you do have any mountain or water ranges, they don't come up across any mountain or water, or I guess any of the opposite colors, then you're going to be okay with that. So everybody places their starting positions. Next you go through and place the neutral units as indicated on the neutral unit spot there. You'll notice I've got a couple of beads in here with some giants. That's because I was too giant shy. A little bit of an oversight maybe on the developer's part, but you know, make do. When you're placing units, if you don't have any units of your particular color to recruit, then you can't recruit them anymore. As far as setting up the game, I say it's only fair if they all have their starting units. So later on when you're recruiting the neutral units, you really shouldn't use this beat approach. But at the very beginning of the game, come on, you got to set it up appropriately, especially if you're OCD like me. Now once you've placed all of the neutral units, you take the cities and you just find enough randomly to cover all the cities on your map, and you place them face up just randomly. Or if you want to play an explorer, you can place them face down and kind of come across them and explore them as needed. But the rules do say you place them face up initially, so you kind of know what you're going for on your way out there. The next step in the setup is to place your stronghold with the healthy side up, not the damaged side, in any of your 3 realms. You may notice this is now the undead realm because those are the tokens and figures I already pulled out. To make things simple for me, I just did that. So at any rate, you can place it wherever you'd like. I typically put it in the back corner, so do what you will. Once you've got your starting position out, you're going to recruit based on your starting resources. So if you look at your resource gauge, this is very simple to read. Where I'm in this position, I can get this and anything beneath it. So when recruiting units, I'm going to ignore everything else, and I get to pull from there 1 of the swordsmen, 2 of the swordsmen. Then moving over here, I get to pull 1 bowman because it's from here moving back, and from here I get to pull 1 sorcerer. So as you can see, if you increase your ore value enough, it does increase what armies you can recruit. And same with all of these. As you increase your values, say for instance if it was here, you'd be able to recruit him, a bowman, and a bowman. But for starting positions, we're just going to recruit for this faction a sorcerer, a bowman, and 2 swordsmen. Now, you'll notice if you're using the expansion, these characters are not on that table. But over here, you see the equivalent of where these would fall in the recruiting table. So on this recruiting table, since I do have a sorcerer, I can choose whether I want it to be the sorcerer or the vampire. And if it was a cavalry, then I could replace it with one of those. I could pick and choose. Again, bearing in mind that if I don't have the physical plastic figure for it, I cannot recruit it one way or the other. So once you've recruited your starting units, I've decided to go with the vampire instead of the sorcerer and the 2 swordsmen and the bowman, because I didn't have a choice on those. You can place them anywhere in your starting region. From here out, whenever you recruit, it will have to be from a stronghold. But at the very beginning of the game, you can place them anywhere in your starting region. Now the only rule to placing units and ending movement and all of that is you can never have more than 8 units from the same faction in a specific square. That goes with neutral, the elves, the undead, whatever. So I could have 8 undead and 8 of the other, but when you're ending your turn, you cannot have more than 8. We'll cover the exception to that rule when we cover movement. But for now, that's all we need to know. So maybe I'm going to put my archer and my skeletal warriors here, guarding that pass, and then my vampire there. It doesn't really matter. Do whatever you will. Next, you're going to take 3 of the rune tokens. 2 of the rune tokens will be real runes, and 1 will be a fake rune. You'll flip them to the question mark side, and you'll place them in your starting area. Wherever you want to put them, it's up to you. Now you can look at these through the course of the game if you'd like, at your discretion, but you probably do not want your opponents to see them at any time. Now in your starting area here, these 3 hexes, those are going to be considered yours whether they're empty or not. Through the rest of the game, the rest of the map, if you don't have units in it, or a stronghold, you are not considered holding that for the sake of resources. However, in these areas, if you don't have any units in it, if it's one of your home areas, you are still considered holding it unless your opponents are in here contesting it. The very next thing you're going to want to do is pull this deck up with all of the cards that come in the game, and then you're going to want to pull out from that all of them that match each individual hex in your game. So In this game I would go through all the hexes I place outside of the starting realms, because they don't have numbers if you'll recall, and I'm going to find all of the hexes that are indicated by that hex number, match them up, and then make a deck out of those. Once I have that deck created, I'll also throw in these ones that do not have any hex referenced to them for my quest card deck. And then I will deal each player 2 quests from the quest deck that I've just created. And then we'll pull the hero cards, which are indicated by this back. We will look at the hero cards, and you'll want to separate the hero cards into 3 different piles. One with the good guys, one with, well, that's another good guy, one with the bad guys, and then one with the neutral guys. Then you'll randomize those and draw one from your faction. So let's say this was on the top of the bad guy faction, this would be my hero. I would take the matching figure and place it anywhere in my starting area. Once that's done, I will shuffle all of the 3 hero decks I've just created back together to make one big hero deck again. Then you're going to place all of the cards, all of the tokens, all of the everything where you can reach them. All of the card decks will be face down with the exception of this one. These are the titles that you can hold. They are dealt face up, and they are in a manner where you can see all of them at all times. And of course, as already indicated, these upgrade cards you're going to have face up. But everything else will be face down, and the tokens will just be out where everybody can reach them. It doesn't matter if they're face up or face down. Now during setup, there are a couple of optional rules that I think both add a lot of fun to the table. From the base game, if you look on the back of your neutral unit reference sheet, there are special location reference sheets. And what that is referring to is these little square tokens, which are special locations that have special abilities and do special things when your heroes are questing. The way that you'll want to place these is you'll notice there are 2 different flavors. There's the one with the 2+ and the one with the 1. The ones with the 1 go with the one side up on all of the hexes that are bordering starting locations. So each faction's starting headquarters, all of the areas that are bordering those get the 1s, everything else gets the 2s. Now when your hero is out questing, when they're moving, say this one moved over here, before attempting a quest or a duel with another hero or anything else, this would be flipped and resolved. And so that's how those work. It's optional. It does add some additional story and some additional tactics to the game that I rather enjoy, but again, it's optional. Maybe you don't want to try it on your first game. Next, from the expansion, we have the Commanders of the Battlefield. If you're going to be using this optional rule, which again I rather enjoy, you will, instead of dealing yourself 1 hero of your allegiance, you will deal yourself 2 of those heroes. And then everyone will also get 1 of these, which they will associate with 1 of their heroes. That hero then gets placed on a pedestal, quite literally, this marker, and placed on the board with the other hero. And then this is placed next to the hero card, indicating that that special hero has that special ability. And there's 2 of these with each faction, even though you can only really have 1 Commander of the Battlefield. So maybe you want to put the other one over the picture of the other guy just to indicate, I don't know. Maybe there's a house rule that you can have 2 of these if you want to, but the base rules indicate that you can only have 1 at any time. And that these don't count towards your hero limits. Later on when we talk about heroes, you'll learn that the heroes have limits of a maximum of 3 heroes you can have at any given time. With this, you'll be able to use this as your 4th hero. Now, this hero is still going to be able to train and upgrade their skills, still going to be able to duel, still going to be able to move just like a hero, still use these abilities, use equipment just like a regular hero. However, this hero cannot complete any quests anymore. Instead, this hero will be able to help in battles with whatever this card is. So instead of being completely oblivious to the battles going on, they can support. Now the hero does not count towards the 8 in that area You can have 8 units plus the hero if you'd like, because they still, as I said, count as a hero for most aspects. And we're going to cover most of this other stuff and all the things that I mentioned in the hero section, but now we kind of know during the setup phase, if you're going to be playing with this optional rule, that's how you set it up. Now, a couple other things that I'm going to go over at this time. They are components, but I don't think I'll get into them later on, now that I've taken a little more thought into the process. Now, the expansion introduces these components. These components are going to be introduced through various cards that can be played or various effects. And this one is called the Desolation token. If a unit becomes desolated, you place one of these in the area. Whoever controls the area immediately gains resources as provided by the area, and then the token remains in play until it's removed by a specific game effect. While this is in play, that area has no resource icons. The resource icons are considered non-existent. If there's a city there, it no longer provides any of the printed icons when resolving the rally support order card. And if the city normally provides a dragon rune, the city no longer provides a dragon rune until the desolation token is removed. Then right here is a kind of a frozen area. Played similarly, and also means whatever area this was played on has no resources, such as that. The difference is, with this one, whoever controls the area immediately gains resources. With this one, they do not gain resources. Also, while this one's in effect, if it's in effect with the water area, you can walk over the water as though it was winter, and this one is thawed or removed in spring. Tactics cards is another thing that I probably won't be covering in much detail. Now, the standard tactics card is just something that you can play as indicated on the card, so that's probably one of those ones that I didn't reveal for that reason. However, there is a clarification. The expansion added these tactics cards, where instead of drawing fate cards in a battle, you can utilize the tactics card for one of those values. Again, in place of drawing fate cards and in place of using whatever it states up here. So there's a clarification on the tactics cards. And then last but not least, the equipment cards. I'll probably just go over right now and then ignore them later. The equipment cards come in several different flavors. There's armor, and there are regular ones, and there are maybe some weapons. There we go, weapons. Now with the armor and the weapons, you can only ever have one piece of armor equipped on a hero and one weapon equipped on a hero. Now these other ones, you can have as many as you'd like equipped to the hero. As long as they're not weapons or armor, you can only have one of each of those. First, I'm going to lay out some movement basics. The movement basics are, of course, you can't move through the water or the mountains unless you have a card that indicates you fly or it's winter for the water, as I've already indicated. You cannot move from an activated area. So if this area was previously activated, this unit would not be able to move out of it because he is in an activated area. Heroes, however, can ignore that. You can only have 8 characters of your faction in an area at any given time. At the end of your movement, I should say. There are ways you can get more in, but we'll cover that. You cannot move a routed figure. If a figure is routed, it's tipped on its side. If a figure is tipped on its side, it cannot be moved until it is set up in the appropriate season. You cannot move through enemy or neutral units. So if I wanted to move to, say, here, I would not be able to go directly because there's a neutral unit there. Same would apply if there was an enemy unit in that area. I would not be able to move through the enemy units. I can move through my own units, however, naturally. Now with heroes, it's a bit different. Heroes can ignore your units in the purpose of moving. They can move freely, ignoring any of these units, either yours or your opponent's. But they cannot ignore heroes. They would start a duel if they had entered an area with a hero. And again, if you're playing with any of these terrain modifiers, they would have to pay attention to those as well, where these units would be able to ignore those terrain modifiers. And those are the movement basics that I'll be referring to as I talk about moving characters. Now let's cover these neutral units and the rules that apply to them. If moved into an area containing units, the neutral unit becomes allied with those units. So if I get a card or an ability that allows me to move one of these units and I move it into an area containing my own units, then it becomes allied with me until either I leave the area and it's the only thing left. Now in this situation that wouldn't really apply because this is my area. So if I move it in here, it doesn't matter if I have any units in there or not, it's still allied with me. However, if I move it into here, it's allied with me as long as I'm there. If I move out, then it's no longer allied with me, it's neutral again. Same thing with my opponents. If an opponent moves it in with them, or if I choose to move it into opponent area to attack them, it won't work because it will then become allied with them. When it is allied, it basically can be moved with your units. So if I decide I'm allied with this unit and I want to move into here, I can move it with me, and it does count towards my 8 that I can have in that area, and it does participate in combat with me. Now, if ever something is impacting a neutral unit that is not allied, say I'm coming in here and I'm attacking it. Now if I move into an area with a neutral unit, it is not allied with me because I'm invading on its territory. I can attempt diplomacy, and if ever the neutral character is not allied with somebody who's taking their turn, the person to their left would determine their actions when attacking and taking damage and retreating and routing and all that other stuff. But as long as they're allied with you, you make those decisions. Which leads me to our next important thing is diplomacy and how diplomacy works. If I were to move into here and attempt diplomacy, you can spend 1 to 6 influence all at once. You can't spend 3, draw your fate cards and decide you didn't like it and spend 3 more. You can spend anywhere from 1 to 6 of your fate tokens, these little bad boys, all at one time to draw that many of the fate cards from the fate deck. So say I spent 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. These are the 4 cards I get to use to try to play my diplomacy. Now I look at these and I resolve them by looking at the symbol on the opposite of the number this time. So in this case I received reds and a silver. If you have a red, that means you have to go to combat with them, or you have to retreat if you cannot perform the combat. This silver would indicate that the neutral unit would retreat into a place of the person to your left's choosing. And then the third option I didn't draw, but it's this golden option. The golden option means that they become allied with you, and you can move them with your troops or do anything else that an allied unit can do. Now, when you draw your 4 or your 6 or your 1 or whatever, you basically get to look among them and decide which one you'd like to use. Now, I don't want to cause battle. I'd rather have them retreat, so I would choose this one. I would discard these ones, and it would be resolved. So now let's go into retreat. You can only retreat to a friendly or empty area in that order. So if I was forced to retreat from here, I would have to retreat to a friendly area if able. Now, if I was retreating from, say, here, I don't have any friendly around. I could then retreat to an empty area. However, I cannot retreat to anything that is not friendly or empty, and I have to do it in that order. I have to go to friendly. If there's no friendly, I then have to go to an empty. Now, if there comes a time when you need to retreat out of this area and there's nothing empty and there's nothing friendly, then the units that have to retreat would then be destroyed completely. Now, a retreating figure, when they do retreat, no matter if it's friendly or empty, they always have to rout, meaning they go on their side. And if you are retreating into an area that already has 8 of your figures, any of the figures that are coming into that area would then rout, and then you would decide who's going to stay and who's going to be destroyed. So now that we've kind of hit on routing a couple different times, let's talk about routing. When a unit is routed, you represent that by tipping it on its side. A routed unit cannot move or draw cards in battle. So if a battle started here and I had any routed figures, they would not be able to draw cards. They'd still be in the battle, but routed figures can't take damage before healthy figures, which we'll go over when we go over battling. The routed figures will unroute in springtime. And again, it's very crucial that when you're in the battle phase, if you do have any routed units, they cannot take damage before healthy units whenever there's an option. Now, if there are no healthy units, the routed units can then take damage. Now, I've mentioned in movement that there is a rare situation where you'll be able to move more than 8 in. That is to say that you can when you're going to attack, but as long as when you're all is said and done and your turn is over, there are only 8 in each square, you're okay. So let's say this bead represents an unknown number of enemy units. Now, of course, in the game, your enemy unit figures would be there, but I'm lazy, so I'm just keeping the bead there, and we're using our imagination. And I activate this area. Now remember, my units can move in from up to 2 away. In this case, they're all only 1 away, so that's irrelevant. But I do happen to have 10 guys, because I am allied with the white guys in the area with me. And that's 10 guys going into the area, which would normally be counterintuitive if you're just moving, but if you're going to attack, you can do that as long as you end with 8. I hope that's clear. And then, essentially, you will take this battle marker here. You'll place it in the area where the battle is going on, just to reference that. You'll remove all the units, both yours and your enemies, and you'll each put them on your respective boards for the battle. At the very start of the battle, if you have any at the beginning of the battle abilities, tactics cards, or anything of that nature, they go to effect first and foremost. And then the rounds of combat are done. So you start at the number 1 and move down when you're resolving combat. And so I take my number 1, they take their number 1. All of the units in number 1 are then in contest. In this case, they have nobody in their number 1, and I have these archers in my number 1. I have 1 archer, so I get to draw 1 fate card. Or, if I have a tactical fate card, I get to play that tactical fate card. In fact, if my opponent had any tactical fate cards and they had anybody in there, they would be able to play their tactical fate cards. But we'll go over that. It looks like on round 3 we'll be able to go into that further. So, I draw 1 fate card for my 1 archer. And my fate card, we are on the triangle units, so I look at the triangle area. I deal 1 damage. Now my opponent gets to choose where the damage goes. These guys each take 1 hit, so he could remove one of those if he wanted to, or he could just choose to place 1 damage marker on his rock character here. However, once a character has been damaged, that character has to continue to accept damage until it's defeated. So he could put it here, but if I get 3 more hits in, it may die before it ever gets to see the light of day on its battle. But that's what he wants to do, because he thinks his footman is his really big stronghold, because he gets to draw 3 cards. So that's what he's going to do. He's going to assign it there. We'll move on to phase 2, indicated here. And phase 2, as you can see on my chart, I have a beastman who's a phase 2. So he gets to join in the fray. He's a triangle unit. And I also have my necromancer, which is a circular unit. So I get to draw 2 fate cards indicating which would be for which character before revealing them. So I'm going to say this is my triangle card. Nothing happened. This is my circular unit. And I deal 1 damage. So since the rock has already taken damage, it needs to take a 2nd damage. Now we move on to round 3. In round 3, well, I actually have nothing. He has 3 triangle units. So he gets to draw 3 fate cards, reveal them, and then I get to take nothing, a special ability, and a damage. So I'm going to assign a damage. I'm going to follow suit to what he did and give it to my strong guy. Hope that he can withstand the damage, because he's not really going to do much more to me. So he gets to do the damage, and then his special ability indicated on his card, which I don't know if you can read. I will read it. It says it deals 1 damage. If this does not defeat the unit, it does an additional damage. So now he just did 2 more damage to me, essentially, because the 1 did not defeat my unit, so it does a 2nd damage. So then we move on to phase 4, although actually with phase 3 I did have this guy, but that's okay. We've already gone through that. Just pay close attention to what you've got in your neutral units when doing battles, because it doesn't line up exactly. There's 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so you need to pay more close attention to that. But we'll continue on. Lesson learned. Hopefully you guys don't make that mistake when you're playing the real game. Where are we now? Phase 4. Phase 4, I have 3 of these guys. He has his rock bird. Now here, is more of a specific example of the tactical fate cards, because the tactical fate cards go into play before the regular fate cards. So if I had a tactical fate card I wanted to play, I could play it and deal that immediately. Then my opponent, if they had any tactical fate cards, they could play it and deal it immediately, starting with the attacker, moving to the defender. So I guess at any time here, even here where I wasn't defending, they could have played their tactical fate card against me and then done the rest of their stuff. But it's more of a distinction now because the tactical fate cards do go in effect before the fate cards. So if I played one and then they chose to play one, that would be resolved, and then we would move on to our others. So if I had played a tactical fate card, that would still take up one of my spots. I would only have 2 left that I'd be able to draw from the fate deck. So let's say we didn't do that. I'm just going to draw my 3 fate cards. Again, starting with attacker, moving to defender. I have in my triangle section nothing, a special ability, and nothing. Now these guys' special ability is deal 2 damage if you have at least 2 standing reanimates in the battle. I do have 3, so I would be able to deal 2 damage, which would in effect destroy his rock. Had I been able to do more damage, the remaining damage would have carried through to other units. But 2 damage happened to be exactly what I needed to destroy the rock. The rock is dead, and now it does not get to counter back, and he's essentially done with what he gets to do on his attack, and I get to continue on to my last phase and attack him with my last 2 guys. Now when all is said and done, we tally the strength to see who won the battle. The strength is tallied by looking at your fortifications. So if the defender has a fortification development in the area or has access to a development card that can be used at this time, and then you count the units, you total the number of standing units. Clearly he has 3, I have 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I have 9, so I would have taken that battle. And maybe if I was a little smarter, instead of dealing damage to this guy, I maybe would have done it to the neutral guys, because they're kind of fair weather friends anyway. If I leave an area, they're not mine anymore. So maybe I would have killed them off first if I was playing strategically, but for this purpose I didn't need to really go for that. And as you can see, I still ended up retaining my dragon. Although now when I'm placing them back into my home area, I will have to kill one off anyway, because as you'll recall, by the end of my turn I can only have 8 units in that area. Next, you add the strength of any of your strongholds you have in your area of 5 or 7 to the number of your standing units. So if you were attacking the defender and they had one of these in place, even though they had less guys, that essentially counts as 7 plus 3, which is 10 against my 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So they still could have potentially won if they had a stronghold in place. But in this case they didn't, so they didn't. If anybody had a stronghold, and there were enemy units standing, so let's say this was an area where I did have my stronghold, and at the end of the battle I didn't wipe them out entirely, my stronghold becomes damaged. It doesn't become destroyed, it becomes damaged. At this point, if it is already damaged, it still does not become destroyed, it just remains damaged. And then we move on to the resolution. In the resolution, the losing player, who did not tally high enough when we were adding up all of those conditions, needs to retreat and route, again following the routing and retreating rules. And if this was a case where I was attacking them and they had their stronghold there, let's say their stronghold was there, I damaged it from the last step because I was present, I can then choose to demolish it and replace it with one of mine, or just simply demolish it and leave the area empty, depending on if I have come to the total number of my strongholds or whether that's an area I want to try to hold or not. And remember, strongholds indicate that the area is yours, which means even if you don't have any units there, you can still count that towards your resource value, and you can recruit directly from that area. Next, you heal all of your units, so any damaged units that are still standing do not have any damage anymore, so they're fresh for the next battle. And you put units back on the battlefield in the appropriate spots. If you won, you put them on the spot you were attacking. If you lost, you put them in the retreated areas based on the retreat rules. And through this process, recall if anybody was routed, they would not have participated in the battle, and they could not have been dealt damage unless it was the last there were no standing characters that were not routed. A couple other handy terms to know are influence bid. Whenever anything calls for an influence bid, everybody secretly decides how many influence they're going to bid. You all put your hands in the middle, and when everybody has their hands in the middle, determining how many they're going to bid, they reveal how many they're going to be bidding. The person with the highest amount wins the resource or the influence bid. Everything that you bid, whether you win or lose, gets demolished. You don't get it back into your stock. It's something that you put up and risked. If you didn't win, too bad, so sad. Now, anytime that any card or any victory condition calls for you to gain a rune, what you do is you grab a rune from the rune bag, an actual legitimate rune, and you place it in an area you control that does not already have a rune. So let's say the map looks like this, and I just got an ability that says I get to gain a rune. I can then place my newly found rune. Again, that's the ones that have the rune on them, not the blank ones, in one of the areas that I control. Which means I want to control that area even more now. Now once runes are out, I've already mentioned you can kind of peek at them, but you cannot move them unless you play the appropriate command card that allows you to do so.